Welcome to Evil Live, the live media commentary show that answers the question, how many stab wounds can you take before you die? Subscribe if you're new to the channel because today we are reviewing, this is a spoiler review, people, Paramount Pictures' Scream 6. This is the 6th installment in the Scream franchise and arguably one of the better ones. Like, maybe the second best one, in my humble opinion. I really enjoyed Scream 5. But I'm a Scream fan. If you don't like the sort of awareness that the Scream franchise has brought about when it comes to horror films and surviving horror films, then you probably don't really dig any of these Scream films because they're all sort of self-aware without being like tongue-in-cheek comedies, you know. But that being said, this is directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillette. Is that true? Did I not update this? I think that's right. Written by James Vanderbilt and Guy Busick. It stars Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega primarily. They are the two heroines of the show, the two survivor girls, as it were. And they play Sam and Tara Carpenter, sisters who survived the last Scream film. And again, Scream 5 just came out last year. And so this is a really quick turnaround for another film, but it fit perfectly. So they're survivors of the Woodsboro legacy killings. And that, of course, was from a kid named Richie Kirsch, who ended up being Scream 5's killer. And he was like obsessive, emulating serial killer. And he targeted Sam as a girlfriend and then ultimately to kill her because she is the half or illegitimate daughter of Billy Loomis, who is Scream number 1's murderer, one of the two murderers. Matthew Lillard was the other one. And let's see. It was Skeet Ulrich who played Billy Loomis in the first one. So anyway, we have this sort of legacy of murderer father, survivor girl daughter who is seeing visions of her father. So in Scream 5, you really saw this a lot. In Scream 6, you only really see it at the very end. And he's telling her basically, don't trust anyone. You've got the killer instinct. You know, just watch your back and kill people if they try to kill you, which that's just good parenting advice, no matter what the situation, in my opinion. I did take my family to see this. So this is what we do for family outings. Some people like to go to Disney films. If there's not blood involved, I'm not that interested. Generally speaking, anyway. Okay, so the setup is Sam and Tara try to relocate in New York, where Tara is going to go to college and sort of try their best to live normal lives. Sam is in therapy and she's doing everything she can to try to process the trauma. And her therapist is not really getting a lot of information from her. And as soon as she does open up about the truth about the murders and the killings and stuff, then he sort of like says, look, I can't be your therapist anymore. This is a little too much for me. I can't really deal with it. And then the murders start happening. And again, this is in New York City. And it's also set around Halloween, which is, of course, one of my favorites, like the week before Halloween or, a couple days before Halloween officially starts. Halloween Eve, Devil's Night. And though they don't really ever reference that. That is what it is. And we get to see the sort of stereotypical Halloween parties, like the frat house Halloween party. We see everyone sort of traveling up and down the street partying and stuff. One thing I really did like about this is that at the very opening scenes, they did their best to sort of subvert expectations when it came to opening scenes for the Scream franchise, because you always know that there's going to be a killing at the very beginning of every single Scream. And ultimately what you want to see is a great killing, right? Something that is just graphic and horrible that can live up to the very first killing in Scream 1. And in this, they do it a little bit differently, which I really appreciated it. They brought in, what's her name? Samara Weaving, who is amazing from Ready or Not. If you guys ever saw that, she plays a film professor named Laura Crane, who's going on this blind date with someone, played by Tony Revolori, who is in the series Servant as Toby, but you also might know him from the Willow series. He plays, I've already blocked out his name because that series was so terrible. Anyway, he's a great actor, and I really enjoyed him. He plays Jason Carvey. So the opening sequence is that Jason Carvey is going to on this date with Laura Crane, and he is Ghostface. And so he murders her out in an alley. And then again, this is a spoiler review, by the way. And then he takes his mask off so we all see who he is. And that sort of marks it in our head. Okay, well, he's got to die then because he's clearly not the killer. You don't find out the killer until the end monologue, which always happens in a Scream film. And that's another trope about all these Scream films. There are certain scenes that must be had for it to be a Scream film. This opening murder scene is one of them, and we'll go through the others here shortly. So then he goes back to his apartment, and we realize that he's actually making a film with his roommate, who is also doing Ghostface murders. But then he gets a phone call, supposedly from his roommate, and that's where it reveals that there is actually another Ghostface that killed his roommate, and now this opening scene is finished with him being killed. And so we get this sort of double murder implication of a third murder where we just see the body parts of it, and this whole new Ghostface that has zero connections as far as we're concerned. But if you know anything about Scream, again, there has to be a family connection, or else why are there murders in the first place? You can't just have a random psychopath for a Scream film. It has to be familial orientation. And we get that in spades with this one. And of course, because 4, 5, and 6 were supposed to be its new trilogy, and we're probably going to get a 7th with the, just how well this film is being received, then there might be a 4-film streak here, but it was really meant to be a trilogy when they started writing this one. Okay, so we cut back then to Sam and Tara, who are just sort of living their lives, and of course they're freaked out. It turns out that everyone has this conspiracy theory going online where in Scream 5, where Richie Kirsch was supposed to be the murderer, the conspiracy theory is actually that Sam Carpenter was the murderer and framed Richie. And so she is getting a lot of heat from, in social media and from all the other people around campus that she is in fact the murderer, and they're sort of, mocking her and putting a bunch of bullying stuff online about it. She's doing her best to deal with it. I mean, what can you do? You can't really stop social media, especially in a Scream film where you're supposed to be pointed at as the villain and the audience is supposed to sort of suspect you all the way to the very end. And this film does a really great job of that. And credit to Melissa Barrera. She's an amazing actress. She plays up this sort of innocent survivor / could be murderer at any moment vibe. And she really comes across when she has to be brutal as brutal, and when she has to be vulnerable as vulnerable. Great acting chops on this woman. I hope we get to see her a lot more in a lot of other films, and maybe in the next Scream if they do another one. But ultimately, they go, I don't really want to do a beat by beat because it's not that interesting, but Sam is very overprotective of Tara because, of course, she has PTSD from, they don't overtly say that, but that's the reality of it. She has PTSD from, almost being killed by her crazy serial killer boyfriend from the previous film. And so she's wildly overprotective. Her whole little tight-knit group from the previous film with Mindy Meeks-Martin and Chad Meeks-Martin, the twins, they're all living together in New York as well. And they each have roommates and stuff, but they have this really tight-knit 4-core group. Sam is seeing this hunky Latin dude from across the street, and Mindy is seeing, let me see if I can find her name really quick, Anika Koyoko, played by Devyn Nekoda, as a sort of lesbian relationship that, it's only important because she gets murdered. That's really the reason why she's around. But Chad Meeks-Martin is actually, kind of in love with Tara. And this is sort of great little tension that we get in these scenes where they're will they, won't they type relationship dynamic, which is a lot of fun. But ultimately, let's talk about Ghostface, because that's why you come to these types of films, right? The Scream franchise is all about whodunit mixed with brutal murders. And I have to say that this film, more than any of the other ones, even that very first film opening sequence, is the most brutal of all of the murdering scenes, and in a very enjoyable way. But I've seen a lot of people sort of complaining that there's a lot of people who get stabbed and then they just survive. And yeah, that does happen. But you also have to realize that that happens in real life. People survive gunshot wounds on the regular. Like, medical science is great. I don't, so we're so used to, in horror films and on TV shows and stuff, if you just get one knife wound in the shoulder, then you're dead because they don't want you on screen. But the truth is you can survive multiple knife wounds. You can survive multiple bullet wounds. It all depends on where it goes and how deep and how much trauma is there and how long before medical professionals can get to you. That's really what it comes down to. And so they're living with this girl named Quinn as a roommate. Her father's a cop. And so as soon as the murders start happening, they, of course, reach out to the father. His name is Wayne Bailey. And Wayne does his best to do what cops do, is protect everyone, of course. But Sam is telling him, look, Quinn, tell her to be careful, because if she's around us, then she's going to be around Ghostface, and you have to be careful. Ultimately, people just start dying all around them, and then we get that next scene that every single Scream franchise has to have, and it's the rules scene, where everyone's sitting in a little bench area outside, and there's one person, in this particular case, it's Mindy Meeks-Martin, giving the rules for surviving a requel film. Of course, it's like a reboot / sequel, requel. So, they sort of play with that trope a little bit, and all the rules seems fairly, obvious. I mean, it's really just following the rules of a sequel, but just making it bigger budget and, more gory, and everyone, even legacy characters, they play a huge line about this. They make, stress it really heavily. Legacy characters don't matter anymore. Of course, we didn't have Sidney Prescott in this, and it was played up by Gale Weathers, who says that Sidney took her husband and kid and went into hiding. It's just to excuse why Neve Campbell isn't here, and she's not here because she wasn't paid enough. And it really comes down to that. So they wrote her out of the script, which is fine. You didn't need her in this. Sam and Tara, Melissa and Jenna are great enough actresses that they carry the weight of this very well. And there's, the dynamic between them is great because there's sort of antagonism, because Sam is so overprotected of Tara, and Tara is trying her best to live a normal life and wants to have a normal life, but she simply can't because of this whole Ghostface thing. And so, there's a lot of tension between them and stuff, and it's played out beautifully. So we get that sort of, here are the rules of a requel film, and knowing that the legacy characters don't matter enters, of course, Gale Weathers. Now, Gale is immediately set upon as the bad guy because she, once again, as she does, wrote a book about the last murders that she swore she wouldn't write about, and which has also gotten film rights, sort of picked up. And so they're all pissed off about that. Ultimately, it comes down to a sequence of really great cat and mouse scenes with Ghostface hunting them down in infinitely more brutal and realistic ways than we've seen in the past. But again, another one of those Scream tropes is that this isn't the Shape from Halloween. This isn't Freddy Krueger. This is rando person in a mask and hood, Ghostface. So they get messed up and tossed around just as much as anyone else. And I love seeing that. I love it when the bad guy gets the crap kicked out of them and still they just keep coming. And of course with Scream franchise, there's always more than one killer. And so it's okay for having one of the Ghostfaces to get their asses handed to them in one scene. And then suddenly in the next scene, they're being chased down and stuff. Yeah, nice, Chris. Hi. I'm spoiling the story, so if you don't want to hear it, come back after you've seen it. So, of course, there's more than one Ghostface in this, and then here's the ultimate spoiler, everyone. You were warned. There's 3 Ghostfaces in this. And it all, like I said at the very beginning, it all comes back to family. So Richie Kirsch, who was the killer in Scream 5, his father is the detective, Wayne Bailey, and his 2 surviving kids, Quinn and Ethan, are the roommates of the survivors of the Woodsboro legacy murders from the previous film. And all three of them are operating in tandem to kill Sam and Tara. That's really all this whole series is about, is revenge after the first film. And in this particular, well, arguably even the first film. So in this particular one, it's just a revenge flick from the father of the son that Sam killed in self-defense, to be fair, from the previous film. They're the ones that put out the conspiracy theory about her actually being the murderer. They're the ones ruining her life. They had to kill her reputation online before they killed her in person. And it just all comes out in this series of really great sequences. Again, cat and mouse sequences and brutal killings. And then they ultimately get to this sort of taken over theater, like a rundown theater that was converted into this sort of time capsule of all of the Ghostfaces going all the way back to the very first murders. And so what this Ghostface does, or this series of Ghostface do in this, is that they start leaving behind at each murder scene and each kill a mask from the previous film, or, you know, the previous murder as far as like the lore of the film itself it goes. But all of the masks from the previous killers going in sequence backwards, so that when they finally get down to one, they're trying to get Sam to put it on so that she could then be framed as the ultimate killer. And again, the heir apparent of Ghostface, since it was her father that started the whole thing in the first place. And I thought that was a fun way to sort of tie everything back into family. It's not just, you know, getting back at the affair that your father lost. Now it is literally the daughter of the original killer and the family of the murdered killer from the previous film coming after her. This film was infinitely more brutal. It kept you guessing the entire time, which at this point, how is that even possible? The monologues are very Scream. You know, it's sort of that old trope that you saw in Austin Powers, where the whole Bond trope, where the bad guy does his monologue explaining how they kill everyone or why they're going to do it. Of course, you have to have that in a Scream film. If you don't like it, then you probably don't like Scream. I happen to think it's funny and I enjoy it. I really enjoyed seeing all the different people get murdered. And the sort of twist is that of all the hype they nailed on legacy characters in a requel not needing to survive to continue, at the very end, everyone survived. Which, you saw these people get stabbed so many times, blood gushing everywhere, and they all survived. So, arguably, hold on one second, I gotta do this real quick. I just got a note here, just in case. All right, so ultimately, I really enjoyed this Scream film. You know, compared to all of the others, I still think number one is my favorite. I really liked last year's Scream 5. This I like more than Scream 5, so I think this is my second favorite Scream film of all time. It was fun. You don't need to be in Woodsboro anymore, you know? And it's okay to move beyond the original cast and Neve Campbell being in it. I would like to see her, but you don't need her. You don't need Gale Weathers anymore either. So I just like the idea that we've moved to the sort of next generation, and I would really like to see where they go next from here. It seems like they really care about the legacy of this franchise, and they're trying to do their best to pay homage to its foundation, but bring in new viciousness that is really characteristic to a modern audience. We don't just want that sort of tongue-in-cheek thing anymore. We don't want the tricky, you know, sort of goofy murders. We want visceral gore, and they give it to you in spades in this. So 4 out of 5 Evil Eyes. What would have given it 5 for me is maybe a little bit less of the Scream tropes. You have to have certain scenes and certain dialogue and certain sequences in Scream films, and I think that's what's holding it back. And you can make the fair argument that if you got rid of those wholeheartedly, it wouldn't be a Scream film anymore. And I couldn't argue that point. That may be true. But it's also what's holding it back from really going into something new and fresh and exciting. This was as close as we've ever gotten to a non-Scream Scream film. And if this is the direction they're going to go in, I am all for it. So I highly recommend you check it out if you enjoy Scream. Thank you guys so much for checking out this spoiler review. Let me know what you thought about who the Ghostfaces were. Did the story make logical sense to you? Did the survivability make logical sense? The set pieces in New York were great, from the subway to the sort of the sort of like snack shop. I don't know what you call those, little gas station place without gas. I don't know, little markets. To the apartments, to having to crawl across over the alleyway on a ladder to the boyfriend's house to avoid ghost. I mean, all of it worked for me. I loved it so much. I hope it did for you too. Always remember that evil spells backwards is live. So get out there and be evil.